So in the magic pill question, had a lot of people ask about diabetes, though, and I want to get into that because we've got the. I was just looking at the stats. You've rattled them off at this point. I think they're saying 1 in 3 Americans has pre-diabetes, and so I think the bulk of our merit is going to be around that. But we did have a handful of people to that question talk about just dealing with if they had a magic pill, it would cure their type 1 diabetes.
Right.
So I think that's the minority. But for those folks, I mean, you've had type 1 diabetes, and I don't think you can say you've cured type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, correct. Type 1, type 2, very different situations. Although, here's the thing about type 1 is in recent years, even in the endocrinology world, I would submit that many of them, and I don't have statistics for this, but type 1 is likely an autoimmune condition. And that's what equal, 2 times ago, I think we talked about autoimmune and nobody thinks about type 1 diabetes. But if you consider that it's basically the beta cells or the pancreatic cells that are responsible for secreting the insulin basically get attacked by your own immune system and they then dysfunction.
Okay.
And by the time it's ever found, they're destroyed. Right. And so the kid is 2 or 10 or 15 or 40. And that would be more unusual for it to be later on. But then all of a sudden, they get sick, they go to the ER and they're in diabetic ketoacidosis, right? And super sick. It's like, oh my gosh, we have now found type 1 diabetes. But why is it there and what happened? And that's always been a mystery as to what leads to type 1. And it's fascinating to me that even though we call it type 1, type 2, it's essentially different. These are different pathological processes. But type 1, could theoretically be thought of as an autoimmune condition, some of them. And so why don't we screen at what age? At 1, at 2, at 3, to screen people for antibodies to the pancreatic beta islet cells? And what would that then, would we find pre-type 1
Yeah.
people? And okay, well, what's triggering the immune system to do that? There's a connection to dairy, interestingly. And then we go right back into, well, what's the nutrition? Is there stressful environment at home? Is there abuse? And we don't know.
Yeah.
And so type 1, now people that wrote in and said, gosh, what a pain in the rear. And it is. It's just a tremendous pain in the rear
Yeah.
to have to do your own insulin. Um, but that's probably not today's topic, is it?
Well, but I will ask this. I mean, so if I'm out there as these folks are with type 1 diabetes, if you, Dr. James, wake up tomorrow and boom, you have type 1 diabetes, what are you going to do?
Yeah. So how do you make, so I would look at type 1 people and I would never say, oh, if you just change your diet, we can cure that. I would say, can you be becoming, just like I would say to Kevin Miller, a more resilient, more capable, less brittle type 1.
Yeah.
So there's lots of type 1s that, it's like they have to take their sugars and do the insulin 10 times a day to feel right because they're so brittle. And they have to keep changing their sugars or their dosing regimen all the time. And these days we have continuous glucose monitors and we've got, the patches on your arm. You can always know what your glucose level is.
Yeah, I'm used to seeing now people, you go to eat over here and we're going to get sushi and they look at, okay, I'm going to order this based on that. I'm going to do that.
Dial up.
Yeah.
And now they wear it on their belt.
Yeah.
They dial it in. The machine does it automatically. So these are the insulin pumps, so it's amazingly more better than it was in the past. And so the technology there, and it's good to be an American with good
I was going to say,
insurance.
so thank goodness for those things.
Yes.
But if you're wanting to be, we're back to okay, so you have type 1, what performance level do you want? What
Right.
disability are you okay with? We had if you remember years ago when we had the elite runners that stayed at our house
Yeah.
for altitude training. One of the guys on the team, I think we only had him once or something like that, but he was known as he's severely asthmatic. I mean, he has asthma.
Yeah.
And so he's, however old, 19 or 25, I don't know what he was. And he's also, heading towards the Olympics, but he that was his, I wish I had his name. I didn't think about it till now, but he had a blog and everything. He says, this is what I have to do as an asthmatic to be able to do that. So all my buddies are over here on the team doing XYZ. I'm doing that. Plus I'm doing all that. Now he wanted a performance level. And so his life was around monitoring and managing his deficiency,
Yeah.
his brokenness in there. So on that, your type 1 diabetes, I guess that'd be interesting. So, Randy, what would you do? And you'd say, well, based on, I'm assuming, what you want to do. So this year, do you want to do uh, the Pikes Peak Ascent marathon? You did the marathon. I did the ascent. You did the whole marathon. Do you want to do that? Are you competing for the nationals in the Masters track and field or ultimate Frisbee or something? Or are you okay to not do any of that anymore? You got diabetes, but you do want to do your work. You do want to be able to do XYZ. I mean, how are you going to adjust?
For type 1, I'd say the biggest adjustment is I'm just going to jump into no carb. Right? Like a very, very low carb type of approach. And so you're fueling yourself down a ketogenic pathway.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the conjecture there is you will be much less of a brittle person, much more resilience and capacity, and less revolving around how many carbs am I eating and how much do I have to give myself and this and that and the other. And I'm not saying by any means that that's going to, ameliorate everybody's problems. But if it's me and on the front side and type 1, I'm going to jump down that pathway of very low carb, very consistently get into ketosis, stay there, and reassess my performance.
So there's things you're doing dietarily right now that you would change based on a diabetic diagnosis.
Type 1 diabetic.
Type 1.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And that's what I would do. I would go down that pathway. We have a very brittle patient who has been in Colorado, has Barbara Davis Center, and that's up in Denver. And that's one our friend that had the daughter with the type 1. And so world renowned center, also making statements about the autoimmune likely connection. And so do you treat people then with the immunomodulators and things like that? Can you cure it? Can you rebirth the pancreatic function so the body can start managing itself? And again, I think these are areas of research and looking into the future. But this one patient, and so her brittleness was now impacting her liver function and her other immunological areas. And so we worked a lot on the basics, omega-3. She had tremendous vitamin D deficiency, several. And I think all of those things just impacted her more stronger. And now that we're doing that, and she and her mom will say, wow, just doing these other things over here have made the diabetes better. Mm-hmm. So down the type 1 pathway, it's a much more medically oriented diagnosis than lifestyle oriented.
Okay.
And so there's less lifestyle things to do down that pathway. I say that, but then I would say, but hang on a minute, we don't really know. And that's where I think for any type 1 that has never jumped down those more extreme kind of pathways of fasting, even, that would be a really tricky kind of thing, because you can't do insulin if you're fasting. Well, then what do? Well, that's ketogenesis. Your body, just like if you fast, you didn't inject any carbs into your mouth. Well, your body's flopping over to a different way of doing metabolism.
Yeah.
And I think that would give those people more resilience and capacity and stability, but it is definitely not a magic pill.
Yeah. Okay. So then pre-diabetes, and I looked at I pulled up just, some of the Google stats. So I don't know. This is diabetesresearch.org. It's saying 10.5% of the US population has diabetes. And it's not differentiating between type 1 or type 2 in that stat that I know of.
Well, let's just assume type 2. That's going to be type 2. Yeah.
Actually, it says type 1 diabetes accounts for about 5.2% of all diagnoses. But then you come over here to the bigger one, and I think the more important one, and this is from CDC, pre-diabetes, 1 in 3 Americans have
Let's just
pre-diabetes.
Go with that, right? So it's a scourge. And when I graduated in 98, so 20 years as a doc. And back then, in the zeros, early 2000s, an older person who back then is 60 and these days would be 80, but people would come in and say, I don't want to have diabetes. Check me out for diabetes. I don't want to be diabetic. And even back then, I'm saying that is the wrong. That is like smoking a pack a day and saying, just check me out for cancer. Just, as long as I don't have cancer, I'm okay. I'm like, well, you're trying to get cancer. Yeah. This is the way to get cancer. And then, okay, there's the analogy of cancer breaks down. But over here, people are now normalizing diabetes and just saying, well, gosh, it's genetic. It's the way I grew up. It just is. I'm okay with it. Just like obesity.
Okay, I'm going to ask that. Let me ask some layman's terms thing, because thrown around along with or around diabetes, I hear a lot of insulin resistance type statements, blood sugar levels, whatever. I got to eat my blood sugar. That's thrown around. Are we talking the same thing, or are there some differentiations?
Yeah. And I love this topic. This is a daily topic with multiple people, and people who are listening, a third of whom can be statistically in this category.
Is that the patient yesterday? Didn't you say you just had somebody?
Oh, well, yeah. One of the guys, I don't want to say he cured, like last labs.
So he had type 2.
Type 2, you're in. Like you've got the defined diagnosis.
How old guy?
70.
Oh.
And we did our fast club with him, and he's doing the fasting strategy, low carb and all of that. And so he's doing prolonged fasting. And here we are, 60 plus days later, and his numbers are now non-diabetic.
Wow.
He's still in the pre-diabetic numbers, but he went from the diagnosis to not the diagnosis.
Yeah.
Now, ridiculously, the American medical system will call that diet controlled diabetes. You're still diabetic, but you're diet controlled.
Okay.
That's like me looking at you and say, Kevin, you are willpower controlled not lung cancer.
Well, like the alcoholic, they say once an alcoholic, always.
Yeah. Okay. Like they will call you a diabetic. Like that diagnosis will stay on there, but you're diet controlled.
Okay.
It's like being like, you would look at me right now and say, I'm a diet controlled obese person.
Okay.
And so the ridiculousness of the American medical kind of languaging there or whatever, I said, Dave, you're cured.
Yeah.
Well, you are curing.
Yeah.
Just like you right now are curing obesity by not going down that pathway.
Yeah.
Well, a third of our population, that is 100 million people. And, however many, if that's just adults that we're talking about, are in the pre-diabetic place with insulin resistance. So it's a scale. We talk about this all the time. All of us are on the spectrum of diabetes.
Well, so let me ask again my big 10,000 foot layman's question of, here we are. Let's just take America. We're more and more eating less health, bad lifestyle choices. We're not sleeping enough. We're stressing too much. Yeah. We're doing what we're doing over here. And then we've got these categories. So you're going along and then something breaks. And it's going to manifest in some way. So this person's lifestyle is going to manifest, and they've got autoimmune issue. This one is going to have, heart disease. This one is going to have, whatever. Is this just, it's one of those manifestations is diabetes. Is that fair, or is that,
yes?
Or are there certain things, more specific lifestyle things that are leading to that one manifestation?
Okay, in that particular case, are there more specific things? Well, yeah, glucose and exercise.
Okay,
are for sure. But I think that your picture there is a decent one if you're in 5th grade, right? Like it's just too simple.
Okay,
because every one of those people groups that then it manifests as a heart attack or manifests as this. I'm saying no. Every single person in America, including me and you, are on the spectrum of autoimmune.
Okay.
Are on the spectrum of overweight, underweight, are on the spectrum of insulin resistance or insulin sensitivity. Every single person has the capacity to be diabetic.
Yeah.
Now, some are born with an increased
predisposition. So we're back to the genetics. So you have genetics. So everybody listen to this. You have a genetic soup
leaning.
Okay,
soup,
whatever.
Yeah.
That is going to make you more, or on that scale, more or less already predisposed.
Yes, that's right. But
And
not
then
predestined.
right. But your lifestyle then is going to pull
Pull
the
the
trigger
trigger.
or
Everybody's got a loaded gun for everything,
right.
and we're all going to die. So everybody has the capacity for skin cancer, but if you're a Caucasian, you are more predisposed to skin cancer compared to other skin types.
Yeah.
And if you are born Native American, then you are genetically more predisposed to the kind of thing that leads to prediabetes, diabetes, obesity than compared to the average somebody else.
Which again, for those of you, if you haven't heard the other shows, I have two adopted kids who are Native American, and they have issues.
I'm one of them, right? So
Well,
I have
they
I'm
would
a card carrying.
they would scoff at you. Yeah, I'm 1/100th Cherokee. They're
Chickasaw.
They're 100%.
But that's my point. I am less predisposed than they are,
Right.
based on that genetic whatever.
Well, so again, they came out predisposed already. Now they both were born and raised initially on the reservation, so they were not only predisposed, then they
began the lifestyle.
They began the lifestyle.
That's right.
And so their trigger was being pulled. My little one
right.
for 4 years, my older one is still in it,
But my skin type compared to yours is less predisposed to skin cancer because of my Native American heritage compared to your Northern European, whatever, if you know. And, and that would be true across the board for everybody. And diabetes. And now, so the genetic piece and the genetic code, the human genetic code in 1999 and 2000 was when, giant news announcements, Bill Clinton, several $1 billion investment. Hey, we cracked the code. And everybody thought, okay, we're going to cure diabetes. We're going to cure cancer. We're going to cure everything. And what they found was everybody can be pre-diabetic. And there's dozens of genes that are related to the predisposition to diabetes or not. And when you start looking at the permutations of the genetic, the way we're all put together, it's infinite complexity. So you are not going to do precision medicine based on genetics.
But it's stupid.
It is.
The concept is stupid.
Stop eating this.
Here, let's get spiritual, because we're talking this morning about, or no, it was yesterday, about predestination, right? So folks here, we're gonna get
oh boy, are we going to solve it?
Go down the Christian. Well, that was the discussion there. Do you believe in predestination, or
free will?
Or free will? Can I pursue and accept and acknowledge God, and then can I willfully abandon God and lose my, salvation? And of course, we side on the side of free will. So whatever you think about that spiritually, and if we just lost you, sorry. But on that, so diabetes, you mean, seriously, you're going to give me a medicine or something like that keeps me from I can pound enough donuts to give myself diabetes no matter what but it's terrible. I don't want that. I don't want that Band-Aid.
No, Americans do want that. They want it very desperately. That's the magic pill question is.
Well, some do.
All right. But most. And I think we're talking to people in our audience of the people like, no. I'm willing to, temper my donuts to give my body resilience and capacity.
But if we're eating in a way, so if America's eating as they are right now, going along, same lifestyle choices, same lifestyle design that's leading towards death and illness and handicap, and now we get a pill that stops the manifestation of diabetes.
Okay. Yeah.
That does not mean there's no health in that.
I was going to say, it does not have much of an impact on resilience, vitality, capacity. It just is going to Band-Aid that one.
It's going to keep you from that. Yeah. From
the depths of that section of pathology.
But your performance physically, psychologically is going to be just as declined.
I would say, gosh, I think resilience and capacity is a better word than performance.
Okay.
It just,
so capacity. So that's
okay.
it. So if I'm sitting here trying to write a brilliant book and I'm going to take a pill to keep me from having diabetes, there's no way my brain can be at the capacity than if I was living in a healthful way that staved off diabetes naturally.
Right. But will taking that pill increase your potential capacity compared to not taking that pill? And the answer is yes. And that's exactly the healthcare system. We pay trillions of dollars.
I say this is high blood pressure meds.
Yes.
That
all of our meds.
I'll never forget the guy I'll tell the story. You have a I mean, it wasn't a traditional practice, but you have an insurance-based model and you had patients that were seeing you as you're just their doc. They like you because you're nicer and you talk with them more about their issues, but it's still, you're going through. Then you change
Yeah.
and say, no, I'm here to really help people. I'm going to help you get better. That is my point. And you're going to pay out of pocket for it. And the one guy that said, I just rather take the pills. and yeah, no,
he got much better. He got off his statin medications. He had a life change. And he's like, yeah, I'd
I'm
rather
going to
take
go
the
back
pill.
and have my donuts and my whatever. And but but there, okay, you don't want to use performance, but his capacity is going to decline.
Yes.
It can't be the best. So now we're back to what, how much do you want? So
Yes.
if you want the highest capacity, you don't give a rat's butt about a diabetes blocker pill.
That's right. That's right. It's the best prevention is proaction.
Yeah.
Right. The best defense is a really good offense. Just be on your side of the field scoring touchdowns over here. You don't have to worry about defense if it worked that way.
Let me ask this question. I meant to ask it earlier. If somebody's out there, because I'm sure you've had the person, somebody is out there, somebody like us, somebody like me, and they're exercising and they're eating pretty clean. Can they still, I guess if they're if they have some genetics, they can still be what would be the symptoms of, I don't even know that. What are the symptoms of, because I mean, even on so this is the CDC, it was like, this is WebMD, the causes of type 2 diabetes. And of course they always try to be real sensitive because they don't want to offend anybody. And they say, it's mainly overweight, obesity, and inactive lifestyle. Those are the main things. And what leads to those, I hope everybody listening to that has an idea of what leads.
I would even, it's not overweightness. The thing that causes overweightness is nutrition and exercise. And those are the same things that cause diabetes. Overweight, don't hear that weight causes diabetes. Weight is a consequence.
It's the things that cause weight.
Yes.
The same things. But can I still, in theory?
Yes, the answer is.
What would be my symptoms?
Well, it depends on if we're talking about pre-diabetes or diabetes. So if you wake up tomorrow and have diabetes, then it's polydipsia, polyuria, something. Well, these are the medical school.
I know. I'm just saying, how do I feel?
Well, if you're peeing out your glucose, right? If you cannot, that's what high blood sugar is. You cannot keep your sugar out of your blood and into your cells.
You're still going to answer.
I'm getting there. Right. And so when your sugar then floats around in your bloodstream, it changes the metabolism. And so you wind up peeing a lot. So because we always talk about osmosis but it will pull water out of your cells to balance out the increased glucose in the bloodstream, and you got to pee that off.
Is it going to be like a different, like yellower or clearer, or does it not matter?
If you taste it, it'll be sweet.
That's gross.
That used to be the diagnostic way. Hundreds of years ago, they would the physician would taste the urine. Huh. And sweet urine is like, oh, now you've got diabetes. But you're already way down that pathway.
Yeah.
And therefore, you also get very thirsty. So that's the kids with type 1. They're just thirsty. And they are peeing. And because of that, you're not getting glucose into the cells. And the type 1s will lose weight. You never see an overweight type 1. They're always, even our friend and daughter, they're skinny.
That's true. I have some relatives that are type 1 and they're not.
They're never overweight.
I have some relatives who are type 2.
They're always overweight. Yeah. And so it's a different disease. They shouldn't have the same name. And so for a type 2, you almost never have these symptoms because it's the slow ongoing. It's like the guy with lung cancer. You don't wake up one day and start coughing.
Yeah.
It's been.
So what would be symptoms of pre?
Nearly none.
Wow.
It is. And that's why you need a doctor to go and get the labs and interpret.
I was going to say, would you see it on labs?
Yes.
What would you see?
Yes. So these are the questions. And like we talked about the other day, and we're trying to create a product where people can, go and get labs like the ones that we talk about that you don't need a doctor. But so your fasting glucose, your fasting insulin, your A1C, your oral glucose tolerance.
So you've got all my stats on those, and I guess.
These are the ones we do all the time. I think this ought to be done in everybody all the time, at least yearly, until you establish points on a curve that you're not becoming pre-diabetic, and then periodically thereafter is just like you can't feel the beginnings of high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or liver disease, or any of those things. And that's where we say, gosh, God has blessed us with all these great labs that we can do. Um, and now they're starting to develop insulin resistance markers. So each of the labs kind of compete. Well, here's our proprietary algorithmic numbers of how so we use the Quest one that has an insulin resistance marker. But then once you get deeper into that rabbit hole, then your physiologists will start to debate about the best ones.
Right.
But for people out there in general, your fasting glucose, I would argue in general for people ought to be under 90. And different labs will, called normal, they'll draw a line at, most of them will say at 99.
Yeah.
And I'd say under 90 would be a better indication. And an A1C under 5.4 is a better indication. And so then once you get on the other side of that, what if you're 5.5 and you have a fasting glucose of 95? Are you diabetic? Are you pre? And I'd say you're becoming pre.
Yeah.
I hate to tell you this, Kevin, but in reality, you're pre-death and you need to buy more vitamins from me.
We have people at a Bible school in our town that don't like to hear
They don't like to hear that you're pre, and in fact, you're already dying. We could say that. I'm looking at the wrinkles on your skin, and if that continues inside your body, you're going to die.
Yeah.
And right, we're all on the spectrum of every single subset of pathology. And on the insulin resistance side, you have some degree of insulin resistance, and you are mostly insulin sensitive. And we saw that in the lab test, although I think that was one of the areas where we said, kind of curious. Now, if you get into endurance athletics like Dave, our 100-miler guy, and his glucose levels were high, way higher than expected. And we don't know why these endurance people, when you get into the extremes of performance, then the labs get a little wonky.
Yeah.
Just like your BMI scales, if you're a big buff guy, you're not going to look right on the weight charts.
Right.
So we throw off those guys, right? Like they need a sports medicine kind of an approach. But for the average people, fasting glucose under 90, a fasting insulin under 5, right? And if you look at the charts of what's normal or what's the statistical average, if you're at 11 or 15, I would be screaming at that person, man, what if your goal in life is to be becoming pre-diabetic and insulin resistance, you're on that pathway. Okay. So good job.
And that's what I want to ask. I'm actually going to timestamp this to tell people in the intro, because let's take the average, no, it's not. The average American family.
Okay.
But I'm going to preface what I'm going to say is average. This is an educated, decent income. These are intelligent people. I'm trying to be politically correct.
Unaverage them.
Well, I know. Okay. But these are people who are generally aware.
Okay.
They're aware of what creates financial, health and wellness. It's an aspiring people. That's what I talk about, which is our podcast audience. If you are listening to a podcast like this, you're going to be in that aspiring, what I'm going to call an aspiring crowd. You're looking for bettering yourself in general. Okay. So where do you see them? Because we've talked about people, we're not going to name them here, but you talk about a family and you're kind of angsty with them. Look, they know good things. These are intelligent people. Holy smokes. Why are they eating the way or living the lifestyle or letting their kids do X, Y, Z? And they're the ones that are going to pop up with a pre-diabetic or a type 2 diabetic kid, or they themselves are going to get it at age, whatever, 45 or something like that. Like they're going along with the flow and they think it's normal and it's FDA approved food, and I'm eating, it's pretty healthy. You eat much gluten? Nah, it's a few pieces of bread a day and you're
hardly any.
Where are we primarily missing it? Because of course we can talk about the Native Americans and they're living on, I can go to Gallup, New Mexico and stand at Walmart and you can see what's happening. I mean, they're coming out and it's just a pile of sugar in various forms.
Well, I'd say that's going to be my answer is sugar, carb, glucose.
Okay. Where are they missing it though? Where would they be surprised? Because they're not reading the labels as much as you and I are. And they think it's probably good. It's gluten-free or it's, low fat or it's whatever. And they have no idea the amount of just sugar that's in processed food.
The breakdown of your percentage of carbohydrates. I would say it this way, that most of those people are over sugared, over carbed. And it's in all of those areas, the basic meal prep that winds up being, there's always a rice, a potato, a bread, a carb. There's almost always that. Now we also have the low carb people now who are recognizing that, and there's many products out there, and okay, yes, but still most of us and the average group of people are going to be on the over carb side.
Okay, you talked about this on the show, and I don't remember what it is though. What's the explanation for uh, Asians over here who are living on a lot of rice,
Yeah.
and they're not obese, and they're not pre-diabetic?
Yeah, actually, so the numbers they're probably, in terms of the percentage of change recently, are right equal with us. In Japan, probably not so much in China, but the percentage of change now that Western mindset, fast food, those kind of things, and the way that so for rice production, the processing um, is changing, even what's going on with them. And they're not overweight, but there's a lot, in even the Asian predisposition. And so, working with, and even in the podcast that I listen to, if you go to the Western United States and California, there's an Asian sort of body, just like we talk about Native American, there's a body type and a predisposition that Asian American Filipino, we've got a patient here, Filipino, and they're skinny fat. It's just classic skinny fat. They're not overweight, but they've got a skinny fat metabolism. And if you look at so Asians, and I think it was called the Honolulu study, when they leave their home of, heritage, and then begin even a very aspiring, healthy Southern California, got a good job kind of lifestyle, the amount of disease is the same as everybody else in America. Mm-hmm. And so, and I don't get into, percentages of carbs on your meal and percentages of proteins and things like that. And even, I've shared with you that we're doing our fast club here. And so for me, there was a few days a week of doing one meal a day and then really trying to just reduce the carbs. And
well, and break that down. We had Angelo, Poli on the show recently talking about carbs. And I mean, there are different types of carbs. I mean, even white rice and brown rice, there's a difference. Yes.
Yeah.
And the glycemic
load is versus index.
Yeah. And you look at, so if you think of potatoes is pretty much just white rice, but not sweet potatoes.
Correct.
Right.
Or even the blue potatoes and new potatoes, different better from the classic giant russet potatoes.
Okay. You got regular pasta. You got regular pasta. Then you got whole wheat pasta. And then what you guys use, what we do, I assume, the rice pasta.
Uh-huh.
So a better carb.
No, it's not.
No, not the rice pasta.
Maybe even worse than the whole wheat. Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. I didn't know that.
Well, and even when you go down all this whole grain goodness, it's too much. But even within that, highly processed flour versus less highly processed flour. And if somebody said, well, what is the best way to eat these carbs? And, you've got a sweet potato versus a russet potato, and the ancient grains versus the highly processed grains. And I would say, yeah. And then you go down sourdough versus the other way.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like with bread. I mean, obviously there's whole wheat bread. That's what we had, Roman meal, whole wheat bread, which not just
brown
white bread. Yeah. And but now today you've got, and I don't know, I look at it in question, but you've got like wasn't it Famous Dave's, or there's the brand of bread that's all the seeds and nuts and
and has Ezekiel brand, and
Ezekiel, which has sprouted. And that I'm to understand that's better.
Yeah.
But we still got carbs. Now that's
is it better if you eat it every day?
And how much quantity and frequency, quantity and frequency of carbs. But that's one type of carb. Then we've got the carbs of fruit and vegetables. I mean, those are,
almost everything will have a carb except meat, straight up meat, or straight up coconut.
That's true, because even beans are a protein.
Avocados will have carbs.
Aren't beans like a protein carb combo?
Yes. But beans are pretty high in carbs, legumes.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean, that our culture has just been built on carbs. And then it went low fat in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And then it went high carb in
Yeah.
the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And in the 90s, we kind of had beginnings of low carb paleo. Well, now we're nearly 30, 95, 05, 25 years later, and a third of us are diabetic, pre-diabetic. So it right along with that is a dramatically lowering consistency of exercise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are the two chief issues.
And the thing that I get disappointed in is the health foods out there that are billed as healthy, that are allowed to have whatever branding on them, that are horrific. The amount,
Yeah.
especially in sugar. Like,
Well, you just said it. You thought that rice pasta was better than the other pasta.
yeah,
It might even be worse.
yeah, okay.
And the gluten-free bread is almost guaranteed worse in many respects compared to Ezekiel bread.
It is. It's processed,
Highly
junk.
processed.
I don't, and I don't eat that. But looking at like Greek yogurt, you get the healthiest Greek yogurt. You can pick up one that'll have 6 grams, 5, 6, 4 grams of sugar per serving, and then you can have what's billed as the healthiest one over here with 15, 20. I mean, just gargantuan amount of sugar. That's the one that gets me, that people think they are eating.
Well, they're doing Dannon and Yoplait and the Kroger brand of yogurt and things like that, thinking yogurt's a health food, and then the amount of sugar that's in there.
But even amongst the brands, you take like what's the Stonyfield Farm? Is that what it is? They've got healthy ones, and you can have one and then one next to it, and depending on what the label is, and the sugar is doubled. No different than we've got Breyers. So if we're going to get ice cream, right, we're going to get Breyers. You get natural Breyers. It has 5 ingredients: sugar, no corn syrup, 5 ingredients. Natural vanilla. The one right next, because they got like 3 or 4 different. They got French vanilla. They've got homemade vanilla. And look at the ingredients. It's 3 times more ingredients, more sugar, corn syrup, all the crap.
That's right. Within the same brand.
And
that's right. The homemade one, I think, or whatever, it was very confusing. Like the natural one had high fructose corn syrup. And it's like, what? It's a confusion.
Yeah.
There.
It's a different product. Same. I see that with, even the milks. You got almond milk, coconut milk. I mean, how many? You got cashew milk, you got oat milk now, all those. And again, one here, the original vanilla, whatever, you can look at it, in the sugar between one and the other, same brand right next to each other, is double, triple on those. And
that is what I mean. That, and then even into the healthier quote unquote kind of a drink of just something that's not water, like Hint or something like that. What are they using to create the flavor? And now you've got stevia and monk fruit and all of the, xylitol and all of these.
We just got the Soda Stream. Did I tell you that?
Yeah.
Which I love, just from an environmental, we quit buying cans and bottles and whatever.
Yeah.
So I like that. But then it came, or no, I don't know if it came with, or our kids got it for us for Christmas. They got us the, Soda Stream flavoring little thing, and
little packets.
I don't even think they say, no, it's a bottle, and it says, put in 3 drops, which is impossible because it just pours out. But what the heck is it? If it's not sugar or corn stuff, it's something.
Is it
stevia? Is it? I don't even know. So I quit using that. But I just want to point out, though, that you and I could have a breakfast. Let's just take a healthy breakfast. Okay. We've got granola. We've got a non-dairy milk, whatever, soy milk, coconut milk.
Which isn't by definition more healthy than milk.
Exactly. Then we got our yogurt, our healthy Greek, yogurt. And I mean, just if we take those 3 items right there, you could have one with, per serving, close to 50 grams of sugar.
Well, you left off the healthy fruit juices.
Yeah. Okay. Then a juice. So I'm over here with my water, and then the lowest sugar, and I could be probably close. I don't know if I could get under 10 grams of sugar, but I mean, it's a dramatic amount. And then you do that every day, every meal, and you think you're doing healthy, and we're not. And it's forced us to take the container and look at the sugar content. Though, of course, the best thing is to be eating foods that don't have a container and don't have a
container. There's not that much sugar in broccoli and eggs and avocado and vegetables but it's you and I, I'm on a Perrier, lime Perrier kind of thing, and LaCroix has another kind of whatever. And, But it's because I am doing less wine at night and I do want some flavor and some whatever
Yeah.
else. Well, I could try to choose to be satisfied with water and just, be done with it. But we're all humans and we're all thinking that way. You and I
We're
are on
all
the
led
same,
by our
we're
appetites,
led
and
by
you
our
and I are
appetites,
no less than the
no
next person.
less. And that's where I feel so sorry for a third of Americans who are now out there. And we're talking to the aspiring people and we're saying there is a better way to satisfy your appetites righteously, if I use that word.
Oh, that's a bad word. That's a judgmental word.
Oh my gosh.
We just
Okay.
health,
But we
more
are making a
healthy.
judgment that the box of Cheerios is not as good as a different way to eat breakfast. It's not, according to our parameters and of judgment.
Well, sure, and that you could come to the CDC and the diabetes, and they'll line that out. That this amount of sugar and this form, and they'll back
Will
that up.
they? No, I'm going to say that their parameters are subpar. That the American Heart Association puts a stamp of approval on Cheerios as a heart healthy.
Yeah, that's true.
And there is huge debate about this, right? Like now we're at policy level
And that's
discussion.
funny though. I mean, I have infants, babies that we gave Cheerios. I mean, that was like the healthy thing, a little bag of Cheerios to keep the kid quiet during church or whatever. And now I would use it as packing peanuts. I'm not gonna.
That's right.
Or a treat or a cake.
As cake. That's right. And Mark Hyman, I can't remember what book. I think it's in his last one, is Food Fix, says something along these lines, that if we were to step back from that big picture view and take a look at the consequences of death, dismemberment, if you look at the consequences of diabetes and you lose a foot, blindness, the consequences of the kinds of food that we eat, if we knew that another country had injected our society with Cheerios, with sugar, we would go to war, because it's wrecking the way of life. It's killing people. It's taking away vitality. It's putting people in nursing homes. It's creating dementia. And we're feeding our kids this stuff willingly. And I feel sorry for us.
My wife has a grandmother in a home who has lived a long life. Now, she hasn't been very able-bodied for a long time. She's been lingering, as you talk about, for a long time, which to me is not much of a life. And I see the pictures every time that they're having, dinner with grandma, they post online, and it is not life-giving food. It's a tray of brown carbohydrate food, and it
looks a lot like the food that is served in public schools.
And they're being militant on wearing a mask. And I think, man, that is not the most, that's not the thing that's most jeopardizing your health right now, is that possibility. I mean, we talked about food, but now another piece of this is exercise. How does that factor into diabetes? Does it just help regulate?
Yeah, you got to spend the food, right? If you're going to put it in, you got to spend it. And what we do in America is we eat a breakfast that is way overbalanced in carbohydrates. And then we go sit in our car on the way to work, and we sit at work, and then it's lunchtime and we eat because it's lunchtime, but we haven't spent a tenth of what we just ate. We haven't spent it, but then people are hungry, and we go into all of, why am I hungry if I'm, and it's not that you're not hungry. I'm not debating that, but how can somebody who's 10, 20, 40, 100 pounds overweight actually be hungry? It doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
So, but you are.
And sometimes they're the hungriest. I mean, their
body. That's right.
So
your
inefficient.
Body is so not inefficient, but it has trained into, yes, we eat now. And yes, we're hungry.
So you're saying it's just mental?
It's very efficiently taking what you eat and packing it away.
Okay.
But it's ready for the next time because you've trained it to be that way.
Okay.
And packing it away. And, we're doing our fasting club, training people up to prolonged fasting once a week. And John's doing it. Well, he's not an overweight guy, but he was going to become that, was my conjecture. He carries his weight well, and he would make a good caveman, where you get to eat and then you don't eat for 3 days because now you got to go find some more stuff. And his body would do that pretty well. He would. And I think, we are all built to do that.
Yeah.
And now we live in a society where we eat too much breakfast and we don't spend it. Then we go eat lunch and we don't spend that. And then it's dinner time. And then we go to bed after watching TV. Our society is perfectly built to create diabetes.
Yeah.
And we are. And unfortunately, most of us are not in the aspiring crowd. We want a pill, and we want trillions of dollars in R&D to be spent on this, and then we don't want to pay for the pill. If the pill were going to cost what it ought to cost, and people had to pay for it, and you had to quit eating so much and save your money over here and over to buy the pill, but it's not going to be that way.
It's not.
It's just
the Super Bowl's coming up in what, a week or something like that.
yeah.
Watch the ads. It's going to be
They're
Doritos,
food
and
ads,
Oreos, and what? And if there's something that's on there that says healthy, like some yogurt, look at the sugar content on the back.
Well, I do remember last year there was an ad for avocados.
Oh, well, God. And I have seen the pistachio ones too, like from the
Pistachio,
United, Association of Pistachio Growers, whatever.
Yeah.
So, okay, we'll go with them. We'll support them. Yeah. Okay.
There, it's a hard topic to stop talking about. But on the exercise thing, one of the things I wanted to say is lean muscle mass. For people to understand that lean muscle mass, we do a BIA, right? That's going to measure, and it's complex to do how much body fat do you have and the content and that kind of thing. But to know in the opposite of lean muscle mass is the skinny fat, somebody who's not technically overweight, but you got, cellulite kind of stuff. And I tell women sort of jokingly, what you want is a bigger butt. The lean muscle part of that, not the fat content. You want a bigger core because your glute, back, quad, hams, that is your core.
Well, they even talk about that. If you want to build muscle, bodybuilding or whatever, it's almost like a catalyst is quads and glutes, isn't it? For some reason, because it's so big. Or
well, I don't know about bodybuilding, but it is your total amount of lean muscle mass is taken in whole an endocrine organ. Endocrine meaning hormonal. It is a part of the control mechanism of insulin resistance and sensitivity, because muscle is highly sensitive to insulin. Why? Well, because when you exercise your muscle, you got to get glucose in there fast and efficiently.
Are you saying more muscle is a hormone regulator? Is that what you're
Yes. Yes.
Not heard that.
No, you haven't. And people don't think about it that way. Think of a waterbed and how sloshy it is. Remember the 70s, and a lot of people had waterbed. I had a friend with a waterbed, and he had no baffle in it. I'm like, how can you stand this? Because you move and it wiggles around. That's America with their insulin and glucose. They're flopping all over the place because those people who also have hunger and they can't, if you go 2-3 hours away from and they want a snack and they say, I'm hypoglycemic. They're not, but they feel it, right? So they've got pounds of extra energy stored on their body, but in that moment they feel low energy and they got to go get a snack.
Yeah.
That's like that waterbed sloshing around from hyper to hypo, from hyper to hypo. And you put a baffle in there. That's what reducing your carbs. That's what exercise is. Lean muscle mass is a big baffle. It removes those. And that's what you and I go to say. You ought to be able to go 3 days, and we have, and you can still exercise. It doesn't kill you. You're not going to die. You might have a wave of hunger, but then you go on. And many Americans can't do that. They wouldn't die, but they would feel very, very bad. That's that waterbed sloshing.
Withdrawal. Yeah.
They go through withdrawal. And part of that withdrawal is lack of lean muscle mass, which means lack of the appropriate kinds of consistent exercises that creates lean muscle mass.
I hope that does justice. I know there's so much. I think people get it. I mean, it's a great show, I think, to send to people who are not aware of what is causing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.